Most people think envy begins with hatred. It doesn't. It often begins with admiration. Have you ever wondered why someone who once seemed supportive suddenly becomes distant, sarcastic, or strangely uncomfortable around you? Why do certain people start criticizing you only after you begin succeeding? The answer is rarely as obvious as it seems, because envy almost never announces itself openly. It hides behind jokes, behind fake advice, behind polite smiles, and sometimes behind people who still call themselves your friends. The biggest mistake isn't failing to recognize envy. The biggest mistake is believing you can erase it by becoming smaller. I am the Watcher, and here in Shadow Insight, we look beyond appearances to uncover the hidden mechanisms that quietly shape human behavior. If you've ever felt that someone changed toward you for reasons you couldn't explain, you're in the right place. Subscribe if you're interested in understanding the invisible dynamics most people never notice. Because before this video ends, you'll discover why trying to reassure an envious person often strengthens the very emotion you're trying to calm, and why one simple mistake can quietly turn admiration into lasting resentment. Watch carefully. Human nature always reveals itself eventually. Have you ever noticed that people rarely tell you they're envious? Almost no one does. Instead, envy disguises itself as something much easier to accept: concern, humor, constructive criticism, curiosity. It begins with small changes that seem too insignificant to matter. Someone who used to celebrate your successes suddenly becomes quiet. Your good news receives shorter replies. Your victories are quickly followed by comments about luck, or they immediately change the subject. At first, you assume they're simply having a difficult day. After all, everyone goes through hard times. But with time, you begin to notice a pattern. Every achievement you share seems to make them just a little more uncomfortable. The strange thing about envy is that it doesn't always appear when you become rich, or famous, or powerful. Sometimes, all it takes is becoming slightly happier than you were before, buying your first home, losing weight, finding peace after a difficult relationship, starting a business, building confidence. These changes don't only transform your life, they silently force other people to compare their own. And comparison is where envy quietly begins. Imagine two old friends. For years, their lives followed similar paths. They shared the same frustrations, the same complaints, the same dreams. Then one of them slowly changes. He begins exercising. He stops apologizing for his ambitions. His career improves. He smiles more often. Nothing about him becomes arrogant, yet something between them feels different. Not because success changed him, but because his progress became an unexpected mirror. Without saying a word, his life now asks a painful question. If it's possible for him, why haven't I done the same? Most people never realize that envy isn't always directed at what you have. Sometimes it's directed at what your existence reminds them of. You become living evidence of a possibility they never pursued, and that realization is deeply uncomfortable. So instead of confronting that discomfort, many people unconsciously search for ways to reduce yours. A sarcastic comment, a subtle criticism, a joke that feels strangely personal, a reminder of your past mistakes. Tiny actions, almost invisible. Each one seems harmless on its own, but together they reveal something far more important. Because when admiration quietly transforms into comparison, comparison often becomes resentment, and resentment rarely stays silent forever. Watch carefully. Most people believe envy is caused by what you own: a better job, more money, greater success. But those things are only the surface. The real trigger is much deeper. Envy begins the moment another person's success forces someone to confront the parts of themselves they've been avoiding. Jung believed that every person carries a shadow, not only the qualities they hide from the world, but also the potential they quietly abandoned, the life they once imagined, the courage they never used, the discipline they postponed, the dreams they convinced themselves were impossible. Most of the time, that shadow remains silent. Daily routines keep it buried, excuses keep it comfortable. Life goes on, until someone nearby becomes proof that those excuses may no longer be true. That is why the same achievement can produce completely different reactions. One person feels inspired, another feels threatened. The achievement hasn't changed, only what it awakens inside them. Have you ever wondered why strangers often celebrate your success more easily than people who've known you for years? Because strangers have no emotional investment in the version of you they first met. The people closest to you do. Every relationship creates an invisible balance. Everyone unconsciously assigns roles: the responsible one, the funny one, the dreamer, the successful one, the one who always struggles. Those roles provide stability. They make people feel they understand each other. But the moment you begin changing, that balance starts to shift. The quiet friend becomes confident. The employee becomes the business owner. The insecure person begins setting boundaries. And suddenly, the people around them no longer know where they fit. For some, that change is exciting. For others, it's deeply unsettling. Because your growth doesn't simply improve your own life, it quietly rewrites the relationship. Without realizing it, they may begin searching for evidence that your transformation isn't real. They notice your mistakes more quickly. They question your decisions more often. They become unusually interested in your failures, not necessarily because they want you to suffer, but because your failure would restore the version of reality that once made them feel secure. Human nature seeks emotional consistency. If your growth threatens someone else's internal story, their mind will often try to protect that story before it questions itself. That is why envy is rarely about you. It is about the silent conflict taking place inside the other person. You simply became the mirror they never intended to face. This is where most people make the wrong move. The moment they sense envy, they try to fix it. They explain themselves. They become more modest. They stop talking about their achievements. They make themselves smaller, hoping the relationship will return to what it once was. It seems compassionate, reasonable even, but this is often the very mistake that strengthens envy. Have you ever noticed how some people are never satisfied no matter how humble you become? You stop mentioning your successes, they still criticize you. You downplay your accomplishments, they remind you of your flaws. You apologize for changing, they accuse you of thinking you're better than everyone else. Why? Because the problem was never your attitude. It was the discomfort your progress created inside them. Most people assume envy is a reaction to arrogance. Sometimes it is, but far more often it is a reaction to contrast. Your discipline highlights their excuses. Your confidence exposes their self-doubt. Your peace reveals their inner chaos. And no amount of self-denial can erase that contrast. The strange thing about people is this: once someone has decided that your growth makes them uncomfortable, they begin collecting evidence to justify that feeling. Every mistake becomes proof that you were never special. Every setback becomes something quietly satisfying. Every failure restores a sense of balance. This doesn't always happen consciously. Human beings are remarkably skilled at protecting their ego without realizing they're doing it. Adler believed that feelings of inferiority often drive people to seek psychological compensation. Sometimes that compensation takes the form of genuine self-improvement, but sometimes it takes the form of pulling someone else down. Not with open attacks, that would be too obvious. Instead, it happens through subtle sabotage: discouraging advice disguised as concern, silence when you succeed, unexpected enthusiasm when you fail, small comments that slowly chip away at your confidence, suggestions that lead you away from your goals. The most dangerous part is that these behaviors rarely look hostile. They often come from people who insist they want the best for you, and because you trust them, you lower your guard. That is why trying to convince an envious person that you're still the same almost never works. You cannot negotiate with an emotion that was never created by facts. The mistake isn't succeeding. The mistake is believing you can remove someone else's envy by shrinking yourself. Because every step backward you take to make them comfortable is a step away from the person you were becoming. Before you leave this video believing this is only about other people, ask yourself one uncomfortable question. Have you ever felt uneasy after hearing someone else's good news? Not angry, not bitter, just strangely uncomfortable. It happens more often than most people are willing to admit, because envy is not a flaw that belongs to a few people. It is a possibility that exists in almost everyone. The difference lies in what happens next. Some people notice that feeling and become curious. They ask themselves, what is this emotion trying to show me? Instead of attacking the other person, they examine themselves. Why did this success affect me? What dream have I ignored? What fear have I been protecting? What excuse have I repeated for years? That moment of honesty changes everything, because envy can become a compass. It points toward the parts of your life that still need your attention, but only if you're willing to face it. Most people aren't. It is far easier to criticize the person who moved forward than to admit you've been standing still. Watch carefully. The people who are truly at peace rarely feel the need to compete with someone else's happiness. They understand something that envy can never understand. Another person's success does not reduce your own potential. It simply proves that change is possible. And perhaps the greatest mistake isn't noticing that someone envies you. Perhaps the greatest mistake is allowing their discomfort to define your future. Changing your ambitions, hiding your progress, dimming your personality, silencing your victories, all to protect relationships that were only comfortable as long as you remained predictable. Human nature always reveals itself eventually. The people who genuinely care about you may need time to adjust, but in the end, they celebrate your growth because your success doesn't threaten their identity. Those who secretly depended on your limitations will slowly drift away, and painful as that may be, it is often one of the clearest forms of truth life can offer. Because every relationship eventually answers the same silent question. Did they love the person you were, or the comfort of knowing you would never outgrow them? Watch carefully. Envy is one of the few emotions that rarely speaks the truth about itself. It doesn't introduce itself as envy. It arrives disguised as concern, as sarcasm, as distance, as advice that quietly asks you to become less than you are. Throughout this video, we've uncovered something that most people never realize. Envy is rarely created by your success alone. It is created by the meaning your success acquires in someone else's mind. You become a reminder, a possibility, a reflection of choices they never made or fears they never confronted. And that leads us back to the promise made at the beginning. The biggest mistake you can make when someone envies you is believing that shrinking yourself will restore the relationship. It won't, because you cannot heal someone else's insecurity by abandoning your own growth. Real relationships adapt. Fragile ones depend on you staying the same. That doesn't mean you should become arrogant or seek attention or measure your worth through other people's admiration. Quiet confidence will always outlast loud validation. Keep growing, stay humble, but never apologize for becoming the person you worked so hard to become. Some people will celebrate that transformation, others will quietly resent it. Their reaction is information. What you do with that information is your responsibility. I am the watcher, and here in Shadow Insight, we don't judge human nature, we observe it. If this video made you see someone, or perhaps even yourself, differently, let me know in the comments. Subscribe if you want to continue exploring the hidden mechanisms that shape relationships, influence behavior, and reveal what most people never notice. Because the greatest lessons about people are rarely found in what they say, they're found in what they cannot hide. But then, when someone can no longer control your future, what part of you are they really fighting?